start streaming. Hello. I'm still connecting, it seems, to a couple of things. So hopefully this is going to work out. I'm waiting for it to connect on YouTube. Seems YouTube is a bit buggy sometimes and it doesn't like to cooperate so well. So Periscope is live. And it's still connecting. Okay. It looks like I'm on YouTube. Let me see. And it's still connecting. Okay. All right. So it looks like I'm on YouTube. Let me double check Periscope before I get started and make sure it's on. It still says connecting on YouTube stream. So, yep. And it seems I'm on live on Periscope. All right. So let me pull up the chat so I can kind of see who's there. You'll have to forgive me. I'm running this simultaneously on YouTube and Periscope at the same time, and this is the first time I've done an actual show where I'm doing that. So, and it seemed to work pretty well yesterday for the most part. So we're going to kind of see how this goes in regards to everything else. So if you want to say hello, feel free. I have my chat up, so I'll be able to talk to you between the floors. So I'm on Twitter, Periscope, all clear. Fantastic. So, hello everyone. Let me double check on YouTube really quickly and see how that's looking. Are we still going? At the same time, and this is the first time I've done an actual show where yes, I'm on YouTube. Yay! So, okay. And it's so apologies for that. So I have the sound off now. Hello, everyone. Hello. I'm sorry. I'm still coughing a bit, but I'm gonna get over it. Hello. Yay! Godless Journey's there, and Charlie. I've got you all in one place, so I can talk to you on Periscope and Twitter at the same time. Yay! You see me. Okay, fantastic. Sorry. So, if you're new to this sort of format, what I essentially do is I put a topic up for people to vote on, and then they pick what it is that I talk about. I've been going back through old episodes because I used to stream like right off my phone. And, you know, back in March, April-ish, around there. So this originally started with me streaming off of my phone where I like literally wrote out slides and held up papers and stuff while I was talking. But with the advancement of technology and my knowledge of it, I'm able to go back and redo some episodes. So last week I talked about cannabis. The week before that I covered flat earthers. And this week, I'm going back and doing my very first episode, which is on the scientific method. And so, woohoo, in the newer format, and I have some new intros to show you that Gonna Go For It on Twitter has made for me. So, how about we go ahead and talk about the science of the scientific method, and let's get started. Isn't that an awesome intro? Woohoo! I'm so excited and I'm glad I get to be here with you today. So today we are going to talk about the scientific method. Yeah, I thought it was a great intro too. So essentially what I'm going to go through is I'm going to talk about what is it? All right, so what is the scientific method? It is a problem-solving process that scientists use, and it is easy. It's an easy form to follow. And
And why is it effective? It's because it's repeatable and always gives answers. Even if the answers are what you're looking for or not, the scientific method is always going to give you results. And so you can kind of take that in and go back and redo if you need to. And yes, anyone can use this method, and I highly recommend anyone use this method. It's actually quite important and it's very, very useful. So what is the scientific method? Well, we have observe. So essentially we're looking at something, we're looking at a particular thing, and then we question, and we're like, why is this thing happening? We see this thing, we know it's there, but we want to know why or how it's happening. And so then we generate a hypothesis. That's like an answer on trial to kind of like, is this the answer to this question that we're looking for? Then we undergo an experiment to test to see if that's the right answer. And then we get our results. And then we go, okay, so this is what we got. Is it the right answer? Yes or no? And that's what our conclusion is. So let's talk a minute about what a hypothesis is and what the scientific method uses. It uses what we call if-then logic. So if a particular thing happens, if we do a particular thing, then this thing is going to happen. That's that if-then logic we're talking about. A hypothesis is a tentative answer to a well-framed question. So you might say, okay, why? I'm looking at things and I notice that they fall on the ground when people let go. Why is it that when I let go of this ball, it hits the ground? That's your question. Your hypothesis is gravity. So a hypothesis is a tentative answer. It's an answer on trial, and the experiment is the trial. We get our data, that's our results, and then we conclude at the end of that, did it answer our question? So we kind of use deductive reasoning, and that flows from general, like a general type of analysis, to a highly specific. So we start out with, we see this thing happen, and then why does it happen? We think it's this answer, and then we experiment, and then we rule out all kinds of other factors. That's how we go from a general aspect to highly specific. Now, a hypothesis gains credibility by surviving attempts to falsify it. So that's one of those things that scientists are constantly doing. Hello, hello, I'm talking to people on Periscope and YouTube. It's wonderful. It's like it's Christmas today. So what I want to do a little bit is kind of explain how this particular method is effective, what we use it for, and all of that. So I want to take a moment to essentially talk to you about law, hypothesis, theory, and fact. Hello, because this is often confused. It's often confused between the two, and I encounter that often. But the thing is, it's regularly confused. So let's talk about what a law is. A law is a fact, a cause and effect relationship between two elements that always happens the same way under certain conditions. Now, in some cases, it happens differently in other conditions, but that's all right. It's still a law. So when we say it happens in one particular, and what it happens a certain way under certain conditions with or without gravity, okay, we can kind of look at that. We know that it can behave and it always does the same thing, whether it's within a gravity type of situation or it's out of gravity. Bodies in motion remain in motion unless they're affected on by an outside force. So we can have stipulations and exceptions within those laws, and that's okay. So that's what a law is, all right? That's what a law is. So a hypothesis is that if-then statement. So if I get this canine dog here, if I get this dog and let go, then he's going to hit the ground, all right? So that's that if-then statement, and it's because of gravity. So it kind of follows through that. If I do this, then this will happen. it will fall towards the ground. So you can test that and find out that your hypothesis is true. Look, hey, look at that. It happens every time. So that's kind of your hypothesis. Now the fact. A fact is evidence, data, and results. The ball or my canine dog from Warner Brothers Studio store, okay, either drops or it doesn't. I mean, it's that simple. It's either going to drop and hit the floor or it's not, you know, and it's gonna, and my knee blocked it. So that's an outside force that got in the way. So that's not gonna change. So even if this didn't drop, I'm doing great, thank you. So even if this didn't drop and hit the ground and started floating around, that's still a result and it's still an answer and it still happened. So even if your data is not what you want, it's still a fact. So even if you get those unusual results from an experiment, they are still facts, which means you need to figure out why these results happen this way. Could be a human error or something else is affecting your result. All right, thanks for the moral support, guys. So let's talk about theory. Theory is an explanation that is broad and it generates new hypotheses, new ideas, and is supported by a large body of evidence. It is supported by facts. It is supported by laws. Gravity is a theory, but is an explanation as to why things hit the ground when we let go of them. It's not this hit the ground. That's a fact. Gravity is the explanation as to why it happens. Laws do not tell us why something happens. They just state that they do. Theories tell why something happens. So it's based on laws, facts, and we put them all together and we have an explanation. That's what a theory is. And people get this confused so often. But that's okay. That's why we're here to kind of sort this out. So that we completely understand theory, let's address the facts. All right? And I want to make sure we got this solid, you know. So gravity is a theory. It explains why things hit the ground when they do. Newton's laws discuss the math behind a singular fact regarding movement, one fact at a time. Yes, hello. Yeah, I'm going to talk about It's Just a Theory in just a second, Wesley. So that's awesome that you said that. Hello, Beach Price. Hello, everyone. Hey, Randall. So, when we say Newton's laws discuss the math behind a singular fact, it's not a whole bunch of stuff together. It's like bodies in motion stay in motion unless acted on by an outside force. This states the relationship between movement and something affecting it. But it doesn't tell why this happens. All right? It says that this happens, period. We know this happens, this is a fact, but we don't know why. Gravity explains why bodies in motion can change via a force. And it also discusses how mass and gravity are linked. Many facts build up a theory and not just one. So when you say, you know, there's a theory here, it's not just a single fact that's supporting it. You have a whole lot of different laws and facts that support it. Relativity theory describes how mass affects space-time. Yes. And so we have theories that have various types of evidence that are facts that support it. Now, evolution. Evolution is a theory based in many substantial facts. We know for a fact that things change over time. That's a fact, all right? We know things change genetically and they change physically. Those are facts. We see it all the time. We know things change over time. Many different facts show that things change over time, but those facts don't state why. Evolution does. Evolution discusses why things change over time. Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello, Dave. Hello, Gina. I think it's Gina or Gaini. I'm sorry if I say your name wrong. I'm terrible at pronouncing names, and that is my fault. All All right, so evolution discusses why things change over time. Why do we see these physical changes and genetic changes? We know they happen. Hello, Opal. Hello, John. We know they happen, but why? Natural selection. Natural selection is an embodiment of evidence showing that the environment, population genetics, mating, mutation, natural disasters affect what changes. That's why it happens. We have all of these different things affecting the genetics, and the genetics in turn affects how things physically change. So evolution explains why we see these changes, but these changes happen, and that's real. Evolution is a theory, but it's based in facts and in laws. And those are the differences between law, hypothesis, fact, and theory. So now that we've got that down, because so many people get that confused, and I'm just like, man, let's get this sorted. Well, most skeptics of science define facts different than science. They think facts can't change. Well, facts don't change. Laws can change, though. So in regards to laws, we can amend. We can say that there's exception to the rules. And so that brings me to this. The scientific method reinforces or debunks theories, reinforces or changes laws, and it reinforces or eliminates hypotheses. So the thing is this, you can still have, yes, this is it, no, maybe, oh, but you can change laws a little bit. So and that's whenever we get new evidence. And so the fact remains that anytime we see a change, or anytime we get new evidence, we can reinforce a theory, we can debunk a theory, we can amend laws a little bit, we can eliminate hypotheses. The craziest statement I have got thrown at me was that evolution can't be true because we have two sexes. Yeah, that's somebody who doesn't have a fundamental understanding of genetics. And that's a common thing. That's something that I have seen often. All right, and it's not easily kind of contended with, because genetics is a pretty heavy subject. But fortunately, we have psychomers that can sit there and kind of explain it simply. And I try to keep it as simple as possible. But sometimes people, and I find especially with those who kind of fall for the bad science, people who hear more sciencey sounding words tend to think that it means it's correct. That's not always the case. Oftentimes we encounter people who believe sciencey sounding words, they don't have the literacy to understand that it's wrong, but that's what they tend to believe. So if you explain something simply, sometimes people don't believe it because it doesn't sound smart. So sometimes it's kind of hard to counter that every once in a while. And so I'll throw out sciencey sounding words from time to time, and then people will be like, okay, she does know what she's talking about. And then I'll explain it simply and go, well, you know, it can't be that simple. That's just too easy. And so I do run into that from time to time. So let's talk about what Wesley brought up here a second ago. It's just a theory. I'm sorry, hello. It's just a theory, and that makes me nuts. You know, I have to throw out a Doctor Who what with that sometimes. Oh yes, they also confuse evolution with what Nazis did with the eugenics program. See, that's the thing. Science in itself isn't evil, but people can use it for evil things. And I talk about often, especially in my audio podcasts, about how science is misused to push bigotry. You can misuse a thing, and you can use it to do awful things, and you can use it to push bad agendas. That's what bad science does all the time. They'll hide under the guise of science and push something that's inherently awful and misrepresent it and misuse it, and even kind of misrepresent data and say, this is the data, so that's what this means. And everybody else is like, no, that's not what it means. Penicillin is effective, but let's see, penicillin is still effective, but only on specific strains of bacteria. Bacteria changes in genetic code, and it becomes less effective, but that doesn't mean penicillin was never effective. You articulate these things much better than Bill Nye and other mainstream. Thanks for not being that. Oh, sorry. Well, thank you. Yeah, and I hate the just a theory bit. Yeah, and what it does to me is it belittles a lot of the evidence. It shows that people, it's condescending, yes. It's condescending, and it makes me say, what? And then I rant a little bit. So it gets a bit frustrating for me from time to time when I hear that, because having been a scientist and done research, I'm just like, you have no idea how much effort and time and study goes into a particular thing. So it really, really bugs me when people say, it's just the theory. And I'm like, but you don't know what you're talking about. And so that's when I go through and say the massive amount of evidence and facts that go into developing a theory and explaining why something we know happens is belittled in just that small sentence. You're not condescending, the others can be. I don't want to be condescending because I can't stand it when people are that way to me. And some people genuinely don't understand something, and that's kind of what I want to do. I want to kind of set the record straight and help people understand a particular thing. And I don't want to be a jerk about it, because there was one point in time where, I didn't know a lot of stuff, and I thought, man, I felt embarrassed to ask a question. And I don't ever want somebody to feel embarrassed to ask me a question. The difference between theory and hypothesis is clear, but you have a question. I'm doing great, thank you. Sure, ask me your question. I'm going to keep going on about it's just a theory, and when I see your questions, I will answer them. So, if theories change, some people are like, well, theories can change. Well, yes, laws can change too, but it's only slightly, and with added intricate details that have well-established knowledge from facts. So, if we have a slight change in theory or a slight change in a law, the thing is that we essentially learned a bit more about something, so we have more details. Why do scientists call it string theory? It's not proven yet. Well, you can have an explanation of something and have some evidence to support it, but there may not be enough substantial evidence that a lot of scientists would say, okay, this is definitively fact. We have some evidence, but it may not be as much as people would think. I have 1 or 2 points within science, and I'm questioning, but I don't assume I'm right. In fact, I'm searching to prove myself wrong. Not that any of those points are in biology. Well, that's kind of what scientists do. So anytime I would run an experiment, whatever my results were, I would have to go back through and pick it apart a little bit and go, okay, so these were my results. I would repeat the experiment, and if they weren't what I expected, I would run it several times and see if I got the same answer to make certain there was no human error. Maybe I pushed a different button, things like that. So if I get the same results, then I would go to a colleague and say, hey, what do you think about this? And they were like, oh, wait, is it that instrument? Did you have it on this setting? Yes, I did. That's wrong, and that's why you got those results. There you go. And then if it's the results that I wanted, then I would go back and I would go, okay, and I would generate a brand new experiment using a completely different type of instrument to show that my results were the same. So when I was working to develop a breast cancer test, we used not only dark field microscopy. We also used Raman spec. We used DLS to characterize our nanoparticles in our exosomes. We also used TEM, which is electron microscopy. So you have several different things coming together to reinforce your hypothesis. Yes, string theory is a theory. It's just not an accepted theory yet since it's lacking enough evidence. That's exactly what I was trying to say, Wesley. Thank you. So here's something for you. When I was teaching high school, I once heard a science teacher of physics say, "Gravity really should be a law." This man had taught physics and chemistry for 20 some odd years to high school students, and he showed me, and I was a second-year teacher at the time, and he showed me to high school students, and he showed me in one sentence that he had no idea the true difference between theory, law, hypothesis, and fact. String is not a hypothesis. I wouldn't say string theory is a hypothesis because they have several experiments that have evidence that supported hypothesis. String theory is an explanation as to why certain things happen. A hypothesis is kind of reinforcing, well, when you go through an experiment, you're trying to see what a particular answer to a question is. While it might be string theory, it's a bit more detailed than that. The answer isn't string theory. The answer reinforces string theory. I don't know if I've made that clear. So that particular high school teacher showed me in one sentence he had no idea the true difference between theory, law, and hypothesis and fact. And so that is, I mean, and he'd been teaching 20 years, and this was my second year as a teacher, and I was like, oh my gosh. That's when I get sometime positive to a point. I just say, so far this topic seems to be correct. You avoid absolute yes. But this is a commonly misunderstood concept that I encounter this particular thought process in nearly every aspect of society that I have experienced. So it's pretty weird how that's a thing that happens so often. And so, why does this method work? Why does the scientific method work, do you think? Why does it work? It works! How are you guys with Back to the Future? I like that show. I think it's fun, that particular film, those series. Our education system has been problematic for a while. So Wesley was bringing this up. And the thing is it's more rote memorization and less critical thinking. And that's something that's easily implemented early on in early education. And we need to start training children to think critically. And I'll talk about how we see this across disciplines in academia here in just a minute. So, it works. The scientific method works. And why does the scientific method work? No matter what the results are, you know they are results that will either reinforce or eliminate your hypothesis. It causes you to go back, and so whenever you get your results and you come to your conclusions, it causes you to go back and reevaluate every aspect of your experiment to ensure that there is no human error. Excuse me, can I do a show on critical thinking maybe? Yeah, I could probably do that. It works because it's self-correcting and overall flexible and it doesn't discriminate. That's true. And reproducible results are key. That's right. So between what you see versus what you actually see. Yeah. And so instrumentation kind of helps give us an unbiased perspective. And so when you go back and reevaluate every aspect of your experiment to ensure that there was no human error, you also look at the instrument that you used. You should have very good solid knowledge of the instruments that you're working with. And then what you do is you repeat what you did to see if you get the same results, making certain there was no human error, like I mentioned before. And once you reinforce or eliminate a hypothesis, you can move on to the next step. Either test your hypothesis in another way with different types of instrumentation to reinforce its credibility, or you make a brand new one, and then you start working to see if you can completely eliminate that hypothesis. And you know, another thing, people sometimes think scientists go in order of the scientific method. That's not necessarily the case. They can go out of order from time to time and during early experimentation. But that is the key I keep telling the anti-science people I know. If it is to have a chance to be true, it has to produce functional results that seem to go over their head, sadly. Yeah, the method hypothesis must be falsifiable for it to work. So you have to, well, you have to be able to, how can you make it false? Yes. How can you make it false? That's the thing that you can do. So you start eliminating variables to show when is it going to be wrong. Yep. And so, when I was mentioning scientists can sometimes go out of order with the scientific method, what I mean by that, you think it's crucial to teach children the difference between fact, opinion, and belief. Yeah, I agree with that. So if you're a scientist and you've started working on an experiment and you've been going through early experimentation and you have a particular hypothesis, you can sometimes see that it's wrong. It might be eliminated quickly due to early results showing that it is problematic. So if you're getting early results that kind of muck up and aren't reinforcing your hypothesis, that's the time to say, okay, shut down. We don't want to go to the next phase of the experiment. We've got to go back and reevaluate everything to see what's happened. Oh, thanks for the video. You gotta go. Thank you. I'll see you next time, Wesley. So the method works because it will always show you the results that will either support or destroy your answer on trial, your hypothesis. And so it does self-correct. Then you come up with a new answer, or you move to reinforce the one that is accurate, and then you try to debunk it. Other scientists then can repeat what you do to either support, debunk, or add a little bit of extra information to your hypothesis. So that's all inherently important as well. So, haha, thank you. Thank you, Philia, for hopping aboard. So, who can science? Everybody! And I like this quote from the Dead Poets Society. No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world. They can. And anybody can science. That's something that people, they always tend to get really, really scared. They're like, why can't science? That's just too hard. No. You science all the time, and people don't realize that. They do it every single day. It's just a lot. The difference is you're not writing it down. So let's talk a bit about that. Here's a thought experiment. All right, so we're going to engage in what we call a thought experiment. You have a flashlight, a torch if you're in the UK. You might call it a torch. It's not working. That's your observation. All right, you're like, it's not working. What could be the reason? Why isn't it working? That is your question. What's the answer to your question? Batteries or hardware failure? These are potential hypotheses, so sometimes scientific method gives us discovery answers. We don't know 100% what the answer is, and so we're going to try to figure out which one it is. You like to wait until someone else has tested a previous work, especially when it comes to a cure has been found for something. Yes. That's a good idea too. The more experiments and the more studies you have for a particular hypothesis, the more credibility it gains, especially if they're able to reinforce it. All right, so we have our flashlight. Let's try the batteries option. So we do have two potential hypotheses, and the one that we test are the fresh batteries into the flashlight. This is the experiment. You try turning it on. Does it work? Yes or no? If no, then it might be hardware failure. If yes, then you have solved the problem. And congratulations, you've just scienced. So that's kind of, we do science all the time and people don't realize it and they don't think about it. I am hypothesizing that anti-science people think it as a matter of conversion that makes said topic true or false. And I think that is the key that and what I am trying to prove or disprove. Yes, you know, so they think it's a matter of opinion and not the fact that it is or isn't. And so a lot of people seem to think that science is mostly opinion, which is not true. It's facts. And so, oh, do you mean conversation? So when you're dealing with anti-science people, I often find that they just misunderstand the process. They misunderstand the terminology, and they think it's opinion, belief, that's not based in fact. And so you meant conversation in that. Okay. Another example. Babies are perfect examples of scientists in the purest form. All right. What do? They see something. All right. They see something. They wonder what it is. Perhaps it is food. So how do they experiment? They put it in their mouth. They put it in their mouth. And they're like, ooh, no, it isn't food. And then they take it out. Sorry. And then they take it out and they look at it. They even perform peer review by giving it to their friends for them to put into their mouths, reinforcing the fact that it is not food. We are all born scientists, all of us. And we need to cultivate that curiosity once more. Oh, Opal, you meant converting. Okay. You perform science every single day. And I kind of think it would be interesting if you took one day, just one day out of the week, and you wrote down every time you solved a problem by breaking it down into the parts of the scientific method. You'd be surprised, and you'd probably surprise yourself and possibly have a bit of pride in how often you solve issues. It's a pretty cool thing to be able to do. So I kind of charge all of you guys, just spend one day writing down all of this, just make a list of all of the problems that you solved, then go back and write out, according to the scientific method, what was the problem, what was your hypothesis, how did you go to look to find that answer, was it the right answer? You know, if you just broke it down into that type of thinking, not only does it kind of help you practice critical thinking, but it also shows you just how often you perform the scientific method, which is really freaking cool. And if more people did that, I think they would be pretty surprised and kind of have more of a sense of pride just to show how smart people really are. So I want to talk to you a minute about all the different disciplines that use some form of the scientific method. So here we see the scientific method in other disciplines, and this trial and error process, when performed effectively, drives just about every aspect of academia and in the workplace. And how many times you reused a solution to a problem and had it work again? Yes. See, and that's the thing. Sometimes you can run into issues that you have for a particular thing at work. If you just wrote it down, then you'd have the answer every time it messed up. So we see the scientific method in just about every single discipline of academia. It uses some form of it. English, math, anthropology, visual arts, psychology, music and theater, education, history. All of these different groups use some form of the scientific method, especially when they get into research. So it's not just exclusive to scientists. And it's not just exclusive to the sciences. We see it in the arts. We see it in literature studies. We see it in math. We see it all across the board. And that makes it pretty cool. So when I'm talking about this, every single discipline in academia uses this in some form of the scientific process, but the process is always the same. So let's take a look at how one of the forms that they could use. So here's one form. What is the question? So let's say you're looking at a math problem. Math, English, the arts, they all have some sort of this process. So what is the question? Let's say it's a math problem. What do you think the answer is? That's a kind of an idea of like an early hypothesis, an early idea of what you think the answer might be. And then how are you going to find that answer? If it's math, you're going to try different equations. If it's English and you're like, well, I think the answer to this particular question is going to be found in this book. Then you look for the answer. Did you get the answer right? Why didn't you get it right? Or, or why is it correct? That's just as important as why it's not correct. And then you redo and double check your answer. And if it's not correct, you have to start all over again, but that's okay. The flat earther guy that built a steam rocket to try and prove science's bunk was doing science. Well, he was misusing science. That's a bit different. So what I find, especially with individuals who misuse science, we look at, when I talked about the flat earther person in my flat earther video, when I talk about the flat earthers, they ran an experiment and they were like, see, look, the earth is flat, but he wasn't taking into consideration refraction in regards to the water and his telescope. So they'll come up with results and they'll use science to get the results, but they didn't go back and look and think, what were the factors that affected my results? That's kind of the difference there. So you could use science, you might get some results, but your results can be misconstrued when you go through a conclusion if you don't try other ways to reinforce your hypothesis and go back and reevaluate why you got those answers. So even if it reinforces your hypothesis, if the answer is reinforced by your data, it's important to be able to explain why. And that's something that a lot of people who misuse science just don't follow through on. Apply in science to any previously held worldview is my guess. Okay, so then we've got this lovely thing. What about bias? You're like, I got the answer, and bias is just like, snap. Nope. Nope. We got all kinds of biases going on in our little brains, or our big brains, I've been figured out how to get correlation to make sure the whole making reality is not just my perception, because if it's true, then they might be a key to dealing with deniers. You've been trying. So when you're dealing with deniers, and even with ourselves, it's okay, Opal, your spelling sucks. My spelling sucks too, and also autocorrect is very mean to me, especially on my Twitter. So, and then I have a whole bunch of retweets on something with like a spelling error, and I'm like, oh! So it's okay. So, bias is the killer of critical thinking, and good news is we all have it. We all have this lovely thing called bias, and it doesn't go away. So what do we do about bias? You're not alone. Yay! Yes, I can't spell at all. Blind expert peer review is important here. Yes, yes it is. And so scientists limit bias in many different ways. Peer review is one of them. In blind experiment peer review, yes. What they do is they redo a lot of experiments to reinforce hypotheses, and they do completely different experiments to test their hypotheses. And they remove variables and factors to see when is their hypothesis wrong. They also undergo peer review to ensure that their methods are sound and the data reinforces the answer on trial, the hypothesis. I'm not biased, you are. That is a type of bias in itself. It's called, I believe it's called blind spot bias. I actually did a show on that, the 20 cognitive biases that we all inflict upon ourselves that affect our decision making. Blind spot bias is one of them. And not everybody has access to a blind expert, that's true. And it depends on the journals too. So it's important to go through and kind of see, if you're interested, the more prestigious journals are going to have more rigorous types of peer review. You just work with your bias by assuming it is there. Bias is not automatically correct or wrong. It's just blind. Yes. So if you understand what your bias is, that's quite helpful in making certain that you're keeping a very educated perspective of understanding. And it requires you to be very self-aware. Bias doesn't make you a bad person, but it's important to keep it in check. And that's kind of what I talk about in the cognitive bias video. And also, I do have a short video on what scientists undergo in peer review. So if you're curious about the different biases in peer review, I've done other videos explaining it in detail in the types of biases and what scientists do to go through to get their work published as solid science. Now, scientists, they need to be able to answer critical questions with evidence in order to have a paper published. So if you've ever been to a conference and people think that scientists are just like, oh, it's a conspiracy, they're all just agreeing on this. If you've never been to a scientific conference and you ever want to go, I suggest you go sometime. Good show on biases. Thank you. Because they will sit there and they want to be the person that makes the person talking look wrong, because then they were the person who debunked the smart person who's talking about their research, because it's a constant, it's like a one-upper. Scientists are just trying to one-up each other. So if you've never been to a scientific conference, you should. It's not supposed to be a contest, but in the world of academia, publishing is important. And and I will say this, there are some scientists, when they go to conferences, they will have friends of theirs ask them questions, and so they're able to answer them because they already kind of know what the answer is going to be. And so I've known a particular professor who did this. She had people that she would put, yes, egos. She would have a friend of hers that was another scientist, reputable in the community, that had good, strong questions that she could just fully answer, like really, 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 really thorough, to where it looked like, yes, I know what I'm talking about, because you want a bit of clout. There is some of that, but you do want to be able to defend your research. And if your research holds up to a lot of really hard questions, all that does is make you look, really, really solid and respectable and reputable, and that you are a hard worker and that your science is good. Is peer review done mostly pre or post publication? Pre, mostly pre. And with the particular journals, when they publish a particular article, what happens is depending on the journal, the more prestigious journals are going to have rigorous peer review. And then at the end of that, once it's published, other scientists, especially if it's a prestigious journal, are going to tear it apart. They're going to look through it and try to replicate the results or add on to it and say, I'm going to take this because this is kind of relevant to my research. I'm going to use this method and add on to that. I hate that too, the whole scientists just agree bit. And then they point out how this scientist disagrees. What did he not get their check is what I want to say then, yeah. So, but yes, it is a constant bit of going back and forth in regards to that. Yeah, what did they not get? So when somebody doesn't quite understand what's going on in regards to science, I almost just want to say, having been on the receiving end of having to defend research I did in education, I went through 2 conferences on my second master's. I had a first-year conference where I was grilled by my committee, and then a second-year conference. And I was working in a different lab at the time because I wanted to diversify my skill set. So my first-year conference was based on like cancer tests that I was helping to develop. My second conference was based on computational chemistry. And I got like grilled. Man, I was sweating by the time I was done. And the particular people that were on my committee had been professors. 2 of them had been professors for about 30 years. And the other one was the vice dean of the school. She was my mentor, like my particular research mentor. And they just grilled me. She grilled me ahead of time. She grilled me afterwards. You know, she grilled me. She had me well prepared for that, because that's part of it. So when somebody says, scientists just all agree, I'm like, no, go to a conference and you will see lots of people calling each other out on their stuff saying, prove it. And then if you have like good solid answers, all that does is reinforce your work. So you kind of want those critical questions. You want people to ask you questions because it shows they're interested in your work. And in addition to that, it gives you an opportunity to defend it tooth and nail. Say, this is what we did. So for people that go through and say, scientists just all agree, go to a conference. Go to a conference and sit there and listen to a talk and hear the people rip them apart at the end with questions. That's kind of fun too. Although it does show sometimes you can kind of see who the misogynists are, especially the way that they ask questions, and because I've seen some of that happen. And then you can kind of see people's biases at that point. You're like, oh, you have a certain type of bias that's quite prevalent in the way you just asked that question. So, but yes, those are things that I think people don't take into consideration in regards to science and with the scientific method. But the bottom line is this. I hear you, sister. The bottom line is this. When we're talking about the scientific method, what is it? It's a problem-solving process. Scientists use it because it's effective. It's self-correcting. We're able to go back. It's an easy form to follow, and we can repeat it and use it over and over and over again. It's effective because it's self-correcting. It self-corrects itself, and you're going to get results. You're always going to get results. Even if you don't get the results you want, those are still results, and they let you know that something's happened, and you got to go back and address that. You need to be able to explain why something didn't work. That's just as important as explaining why it worked. So both of those are relevant and very important knowledge. And anyone can use this method. You use it all the time. I charge all of you guys just one day. Write down all the problems that you solved, even if it was really quick in your head, and then go back just for an exercise to help you develop, strengthen your critical thinking. Break it down. So you solved this problem. What was the problem? What was the question? How did you solve it? Go back and look back over it. And how would you redo it? Would you do something differently? Science has to be accurate because when we use it on EMS calls, it has to work or people die. That's correct. If you like my videos, I do have a podcast called Hey Scientist Mel. And one of the latest episodes I did is free speech in the scientific community. And so since we're talking about how scientists criticize each other, we need a space for free speech for scientists to be able to do that because lives are at stake. And I talk about a particular case where a doctor was given free rein and they kind of overlooked certain important steps, and some of his critics were punished for talking against this charming celebrity doctor. And so lives were lost because of his faulty science. And so that's one of the reasons why we need free speech in the scientific community to be able to address things. So I have a whole podcast episode, and it's hashtag Hey Scientist Mel. It is on iTunes, and I have submitted it to Spotify for Android users. You're interested in my podcast? Well, cool. Well, let me switch screens here, and I can show you where to find everything. I'm going to take a moment to show you some of my sources. Here we go. There's not a whole lot of sources I have for you in regards to the scientific method. If you just look in textbooks, I do have elsevier.com with peer review, and Live Science is a really good place to kind of check out different educational resources in order to help you kind of strengthen your scientific knowledge. Also, I have stuff on my website. We need to reward papers that show negative results. Too often I hear that only positive results are published, or at least favored over the negative ones. Yes, there's a lot of issues in academia, especially with publications, because publications get you funding for grants. And if you have negative results, that's going to put you on the bottom of the grant pile. You need to be able to show that you have positive results associated with your research, because if you don't, then you're less likely to get any kind of funding. And so that's a problem that's associated with our particular society, with the fact that society and the government pushes really hard for results. If you're not getting results, then it's not real science. If you're not getting positive results, then it's not real science, and we're not going to fund you. And that doesn't mean it's bad science. It just means that they're just not going to give you as much money. And that's a societal issue that science can't totally fix. I know, question marks on that one, huh? So even if you get results, if they prove that something... Now, if there's a paper that's published that says, this is effective and this works, and somebody publishes a paper saying, hold on, you guys overlooked all this stuff here, that person that called out the other paper, that's important. And those negative results that are debunking previous thoughts, those do kind of... Those are published for the most part in that regard, if they're debunking something that's been kind of well established, you know. Oh, hello. So if you want, I have to take a moment to thank my patrons on patreon.com. They get early access to all of my podcasts so we can advance, and I'm currently going back through and revamping my reward system. So if you're a patron and you're on, like, I think it's the $10 up patrons, we can negotiate. If you're a $5 patron, negotiate. If there's something you want that I can give you, if there's, you know, personal bespoke content that you want, I can help you with that too. So I want to thank my patrons, Tony, Lauren, Jen, Carl, Melanie, Anthony, Paula, Carrie, Keith, Zachary, Patrick, Tony, Graham, Tristan, and Jennifer. They're currently my patrons. It starts at $1 a month. They get early access to my podcast. In addition to that, they get special rewards, and all of my rewards are negotiable. So if there's something that you want, man, just let me know and we can talk about it. So if you want to find me, I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet. I don't have my WordPress anymore. Scientistmail.com. Scientistmail.com is my website where you can find all of this other stuff. I am on YouTube, which some of you are watching me on YouTube now. youtube.com/c/scientistmail. I have a Facebook page. I'm on Periscope as well, and my Patreon. Everything is Scientist Mel. So if you just type in Scientist Mel into Google, it's going to take you somewhere here. But my website also has educator resources. Oh, my stream looked good on the YouTube side. Yay! Thank you for that. So my website also has resources. It has all of my slides from all of my shows and my podcasts with my sources are on my website, so you can dive a bit further. I also have started quizzes. So I normally have quizzes on Twitter in the form of polls on every Tuesday. I'm pulling those from Twitter and putting it on my website so people can take them over and over again. I have achievements that you can get for taking my quizzes and download them with your name on it and everything. So you can unlock achievements and leaderboards. This is all not meant to be a contest, but it's to help you with your scientific literacy and to let you know what areas you're struggling on. And if you want to learn more about it, then I can show you the sources to do that. And it's fun. So there's not a whole lot of quizzes there right now, but I'm adding them on there a little bit each week. And I'm generating biology, chemistry, and physical science based quizzes that are formatted towards government standards of what the government expects high schoolers to understand by the time they graduate. So it'll be interesting to test your knowledge and to kind of see where you lie with that. So that'll be awesome. And if you have questions, you can use my hashtag HeyScientistMel because my ats fill up a lot on Twitter. But if you use that hashtag, if you have ideas for shows or topics you want me to talk about, either on my audio podcast or on my videos. Even if it's a short video, you want a quick little video explaining something, hit me up on the hashtag, ask me questions there, or you can email me on my website, scientistmill.com. And it's just what I do, and I love doing this for you guys. It's a lot of fun for me. So this has been The Science of the Scientific Method by Scientist Mel. I just like Futurama. I thought that was a pretty cool gift. So if you have questions, feel free to ask me anytime. I love doing this, and I love helping you guys out with this. And this has worked out on both Periscope and YouTube, and I don't have to like upload it on YouTube now. It's already there. By the way, in my language, Mel means honey. Yay! I'm so glad. I'm so glad you guys could join me. I might push it later to 11 a.m. Central Standard Time on future Saturdays. And so, use Troy. So I might do that because that gives me a bit more time to deal with any kind of technical error. So I might start pushing it to 11 a.m. on Saturdays, but I'm still going to stream on Saturdays. That seems to be the best time for the uploading frequency. You're in Germany. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for hitting me up on here. And if you have questions, like I said, message me. If you can't donate to my Patreon account, I do have a PayPal. If you can't do a monthly commitment, just message me. We can work out rewards then. You enjoyed this a lot. So thank you. I'm glad. Next week, next Saturday, I think I'll pull one of my old ones. Elephants have been in the news lately. So maybe I'll go back through and redo elephants. PayPal is better for you. Okay. Message me on Twitter and I can send you a link to my PayPal if you want to do a one-time donation. It just helps me keep the lights on. My patrons have been able to get me my website, better tech, all of the stuff that I've been able to do. I had to get an external hard drive. So all of the money I get from that just helps me keep the lights on and helps me generate more content so I can spend more time on it. So thank you guys. This was so much fun, and I will see you guys on the various forms of social media. Love your work. Well, thank you, Yvonne. I'm so glad you guys could jump on here. Sending squishy science hugs, big ol' hugs. Be passionately curious and stay loving learning and stuff. I do. Bye.